You're listening to Rise Up, Stories of Recovery, Resilience, and Renewal with Matthew Taube.
It's Matt Taube here from Rise Up, Stories of Recovery, Resilience, and Renewal. I want to introduce our next guest today. This is Charlie Engle. He is amazing. Charlie, I got familiar with a couple years ago. Heard his name here and there. And then last year, by chance, looking through documentaries and watched this unbelievable documentary, Running Through the Sahara. And it was great to watch it. Then about a month ago, listen to your book. It's a much different story when you listen to the book of all the other stuff you go through, just building it up. And, you know, like I've said before in every one of my podcasts, people in recovery, we're different people. I had never met somebody, whether it's big or small, who does something so different and out there than people in recovery. We always find a way to manage to keep going big. So I want to introduce Charlie. Introduce yourself, and let's get this party started here.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me. And it is, as I listen to you, what it made me think is there's always so much more, beneath the surface. And, most of us have this, persona, whether we're a known person or not, that we put out just a little bit. And once you dig in a little bit, there's, especially those of us in recovery, there's a lot more to it. And I've been sober a very long time, over 30 years now, but it doesn't mean that my path is any less complicated than everybody else's. So, I appreciate you having me on today.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad you had the time to do it. And we're going to cover a whole variety of things here for everyone listening. And, from where we started to where we're headed in the future, because you got a lot. And I got to tell you, after watching the movie, I've been talking about the next venture you're going on since I'm like, there's this guy out there and he's going to do this thing. So we're going to talk about that near the end, because that to me still blows me away. So there's so much to cover. So I know we're limited here. So let's try and get this started here. Let's talk about where it started, just where, briefly where you were raised, how you got into it. Running's a big part of your life, and it always was. So it wasn't like you got, you sobered up, you hit recovery, you were clean, and then you started running, which a lot of people do. But it was always there. So let's start from a quick Reader's Digest here.
Yeah, man, I'm sitting here in Durham, North Carolina right now on my front porch, and I've lived all over the world, but oddly, my childhood was spent right here, just a couple of miles down the road. And my mom was a 18-year-old college student at UNC when I was born, and my dad also, and he was playing basketball at University of North Carolina for legendary coach Dean Smith back in the day. And and it was my parents divorced super early. I was 2, and my dad went in the Army, and he just disappeared from my life for 5 or 6 years. And and that sort of set the stage for things. I'm 60 years old now, so for perspective, this was the mid 60s at that point. And my mom was a protester. My mom carried more signs, and so did I when I was a kid, protesting everything from Vietnam to, you name it, she protested it. And, that was kind of the atmosphere, which was cool as a kid. I was an only child, but she was not a particularly capable mother. And as I say very often, I was lovingly neglected. It wasn't abuse, but it was certainly neglect. And very early on in my life, I realized I was really going to have to fend for myself. And, that led me to a lot of overachieving in high school, and, student body president and captain of a bunch of teams, and made good grades, dated some cheerleaders. And I went to UNC Chapel Hill thinking I was the man. And, I got there and there were 4,000 other freshmen that basically had the same, resume that I did.
Right.
And, but what they couldn't do was outdrink me. And, I figured out at 18, and the drinking age was still 18 back then, I figured out that I was an exceptional drinker. And cocaine was extremely prevalent on campus at that point in the early 80s. And, and that became, for the next 10 years, that's what I did, man. I drank and I did coke, and, I went to work for companies that I had the freedom to do those things. And, as I like to say all the time, and I believe this wholeheartedly, addicts are far and away the best salespeople in the world. You
Every
know,
time.
we spend our lives telling other people that, hey, I promise I'll never do that again, and they actually believe us. And, so that led me to be the top salesman at every company I ever went to work for. And for a while, that meant that I was balancing sort of, my bad behavior on this side was ignored and even encouraged at times
Mhm.
because I was making people money. And, and that finally fell apart as it does for all of us. And my first son was born, and I was looking for a way to get my shit together, honestly. And I'd already been to rehab, and I'd been to church, and I'd been to a shaman, and like I tried all these things outside of me to get help, and it just didn't stick because I wasn't ready. And when my son was born, I had one final terrible episode of a 6 day binge, which you read about in my book, that ended with me on the ground, handcuffed, and the police going through my car, and all the things that go along with that. And and I realized, the simple thing that nobody was coming to save me, and
Mhm.
my boss couldn't save me, my wife couldn't save me, certainly my infant son couldn't save me. That wasn't his job. And and that night I went to an AA meeting, and I had been to plenty of AA meetings before.
Right.
And like I always like to say is, I went to AA because, before that I went because I wanted to control my drinking because it was really screwing up my drug use. and and that's how I looked at it. And for the first time, on this July 23rd back in 1992, I went to a meeting, and I was there to listen. And I made a commitment to go to a meeting every day and to start running again. And so I put my running shoes on the next day, and I ultimately spent the next 3 years without missing a single day. I went for a run and I went to a meeting for 3 straight years.
Wow.
And I ran over 30 marathons, and because obviously I had that whole addiction thing under control.
Mhm.
And and but I began to build a life for myself, and
Right.
slowly but surely, things really started to come together for me.
That's amazing. I love that. And it's the the it, the things like going to a meeting every day, right? Running every day. These are things we hear this every day in some meme on social media. Consistency is the key, success, but it really is. It's that consistency of doing it every day. It's not just going to the meeting and doing the run every day. It's the accomplishment of doing that meeting every day. And you feel like, hey, I'm doing this today, and I'm going to move forward for it tomorrow. So
Yeah,
that's
well, that's it.
awesome. So
And I didn't relate at first, Matt, to before that time. I viewed like going to meetings and then business and all the other things I was doing in my life as separate things. And this was the first time ever that I had just kind of trusted this process. I felt like my life depended on it. And that if I went to a meeting and I went for a run every day, if I just could do those two things, that other things would get better. And sometimes, I mean, like everybody else, sometimes I question my own sanity because, of course, they weren't all good days.
right.
And, but again, opportunities started coming my way. People who I had lost in my life, family members, you go 3 years where you're consistently prioritizing. I'd go to a family function or I'd go somewhere and I would tell people there, I'm like, look, I'm leaving at 7:30 because I got to go to a meeting. Or, yes, I'm going to be here for the day, but don't, I'm going to take off in a little while and go for a run for half an hour because that's my commitment. And I
Right.
didn't put anything above that commitment. And that allowed me to actually develop relationships that I still have today.
That's awesome. Again, same thing with that. People see you're doing something, and you change as a person when you're doing that. And it doesn't have to be going to a meeting because there's different people different programs work for different people and how they do it.
Totally.
But it's the consistency of doing it day in, day out, and saying this is a non-negotiable. It's like brushing our teeth in the morning. This are the things that I'm doing, and it makes you feel better. And then you also have the luxury of having that dopamine rush and everything else that we get from doing an activity, right? From being active.
And right from the start, Matt, I was a public person, man. I believed in the power of, and part of this is foundationally in ego. I believed in the power of me telling other people that I don't drink. And
Right.
it's not like I led with that, but like any opportunity, if it came up, I didn't just skirt the issue. I recognized that the more often I said, hey, look, man, if, I'm not somebody that you ever want to see drink again. I would tell people all the time, like, if you ever see me with a beer in my hand, just punch me in the face as hard as you can, because things are about to go really wrong. And, and putting that out into the universe just made my life so much simpler. I didn't have to remember, hey, what did I tell this person? What did I tell that person? Like, it just became who I am. And that allowed me the freedom to just be. And, should I ever relapse, or had I in those early years, there would have been people to say, hey, what's going on? And that's what I wanted. I didn't want to be hiding behind my concern that, somebody's going to judge me for being sober. Well, I could guarantee you they were judging me if they ever saw me drunk, because I was a mess.
And that's the big thing. People do, when they get sober, they do think, what are people going to say about me? What are they going to think about me? And then you don't realize what you were like when you were drinking, what they're already saying about you. Like I know for myself, it wasn't a big secret, but we didn't talk about it. I wasn't in the open when it was 11 years. And I got to get this out there. I can't be hushy. I don't drink anymore. So, and I was apologizing for it. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post called Living in the Reaction. And it was like my coming out party of sobriety 11 years later. And right before I published it, before I sent it to the editor, my wife said, are you sure you're ready for this? Because once it's out there, even if you never talk about it again, it's out there.
Yeah.
And I said, no, we're going to make that change. And I'm going to publicly, this is what I'm doing. An hour after we published it and went online, I went to go pick up our kids from school. And I waited like 15 minutes. And I thought, I'm like, oh, everyone's read it because no one's coming near me. And then one by one, like slowly alone, people were coming up to me saying, I read your article. Wow. I never knew. And then one person came up to me and said, I read your article. Can I call you later? I need to talk to you. And then it was like, that's why I did this. Not even knowing that's why I did it. And it's amazing when you speak it and you talk it. And again, now it's, oh, Matt doesn't drink. Or, it's one of those things where I'm just, it's crazy. It makes that difference.
Well, here's the other thing, Matt. We think that other people think about us a lot more than they actually do.
Right.
because we are basically selfish, self-centered beings, as it should be. And, and we think about ourselves all the time, of course, because that's just how we're built. But, again, and I try to remind people that I sponsor or whatever, how often do you really think about this other person and their sobriety and whether or not, whatever. I mean, we just, we go through the world because we are the center of our universe.
Yeah.
I mean, each of us individually, that's the way it was intended as far as I can tell. So the goal becomes, how can we serve other people, recognizing that the more we serve others, the person we're actually serving most is ourselves. And obviously that's what you figured out.
Yeah. And that's what it also becomes a way of my own version of therapy, where I get to talk about it, tell my story again and again, and realize that I'm not alone in this. That's a big one. I want to talk about community in a little bit, because that's a huge part as well. When you get it out there, you realize there's a much larger community of people who are sober, who are not using, and who are talking about it. And I think it's, especially now, I'd say the last couple of years, it's really become a thing where we all talk about it, where we no longer see, because I know when I went to AA the first time, you walk into, it's almost cliche. You walk into the basement of a church, exactly as it's, every movie's portrayed it, with the fuzzy fluorescent lights that are going off and off, and I met one person in one of my first meetings, and I was like, so I'm trying to make it like a party. Like, so what brings you here? And he looked at me and went, I've always had a thing for really, really bad cold coffee. And I started learning about the humor behind all the stuff that we do. If we can laugh at ourselves. I was talking to somebody who said, my favorite line I ever heard when somebody says, you don't drink, because I get that, at first, I still get it every once in a while. So you don't drink at all? Right. And somebody said to me, goes, my best response to that I ever heard was, oh, yeah, I'm allergic to alcohol. I usually break out in handcuffs at some point in time in the night. So I decided to avoid it. So the humor part of it is there. And then the community part of it, we're learning that it's a lot more. It's no longer, I think the AA route is an amazing route. It's an amazing program. And then it's we're slowly, as we talk about it more, we're losing the anonymity of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I mean, anonymity, look, I am an old timer now, 60 years old and 30 years sober. So I qualify, but I fight back and push back very hard against people who, I'm a very public person about my sobriety, and that's my business, not anybody else's. So I give 85 years ago or whatever it is now, when there were 100 members of AA, they genuinely had a concern that if one person made a huge public mistake, it could potentially affect the entire group. That's just not true anymore. I could literally announce to you right now that I'm going to relapse this afternoon, and I could do it on, Instagram Live. And you know how many people like that would, people would find it horrifying and fascinating and whatever. But the point is, it wouldn't affect AA. It wouldn't affect nobody's going to say, oh, see, I told you AA doesn't work, because that's asinine. We are not that important as individuals. I mean, we are important. The net that we spread in our own network and the people we can affect are affected much more greatly by our actions, by how we behave, than they are even by our words. Because we've all learned that words are shallow. Anybody can say them, but what are you actually doing? How are you living your life? Like, I get in this conversation about religion occasionally. I'm like, I'm not a Christian, not by the true sense. I have a lot of Christian friends. So by their definition of it, I'm not a Christian. But I will say, if I ever get in a debate, point out something that I do in my life that is un-Christian.
Right.
Show me something that I'm doing that somehow disqualifies me from some sort of grace from the universe. And, and they can't do it. Not that I'm perfect by any means, but the point is we try too hard to put labels on things. And I've even gotten into this thing, Matt, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but I'm almost embarrassed by the length of my sobriety. And what I mean by that is there's so much stigma attached to relapse. And I've lost several close friends in recent years who had some significant time, and then they relapsed, and they were so ashamed and embarrassed by their relapse. They went from 5 years to 0 or 10 years to 0, and they could never get back in, because they just couldn't get over it. And I am continuously saying, you and I, of course, have the same amount of sobriety today, and there literally is nothing else but that. And so, I try not to emphasize length of time. I try to emphasize quality of recovery.
Right. And the length of time is, I have, when I talk about my sobriety, I have, you've got an incredible story, getting your car back and there being a child in the back seat. Like there's so many things. I sit there thinking, there was a time I would tell my story and I felt like my story's not that good. Why am I telling it? Because I didn't have any major, but I think about it. I was a blackout drunk every single day for years. I started at 7 a.m. and went all day. It took me a while to realize that's what other people are going through. It's not always the car chase, the the DUI, the everything
Yeah.
else that goes along with
Well,
it.
you've got other good stories. You just can't remember them.
Right. So my kids the other day, I've got 3 teenagers, and last week they watched the movie Hangover.
Yeah.
And there's that scene. Great movie. And there's a scene where they're at breakfast and they're taking out their pockets to figure out what happened the night before. And I started laughing hysterically and like, Dad, it's not that funny. I'm like, actually it is, because I had that breakfast so many times. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're there's never any money in your pockets.
Yeah.
And B, you're hoping there's a receipt, and it's from Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and you're thinking, when did I go there?
My kids looked at me and they go, well, what you really have it? I said, guys, I walked out of my university dorm, my apartment at university. I walked out of my room one night, and it was an apartment, and I saw 2 bouncers from the clubs that we go to on my couch. I don't know why they were there. And apparently that happened after everything had closed. It was like, what? They're like, Dad, this. I'm like, so we're very open about it in our house, and we joke humor behind it. My kids are very dark humor like myself. So when I celebrated 16 years of sobriety, my son went, Dad, I know for your anniversary of sobriety, we should get you like the nicest bottle of wine. And I'm like, you don't get it. He goes, no. Get the kind you like, and it'll be a symbol. I'm like, how about you say we go for dinner, right? But it's that joking, like, we'll joke about stuff like that. And even my oldest one, it was his first year at university, and we brought him a little mini fridge, and he's like, well, we got to, can we put some coolers in there? And I'm sitting there, and they're looking at me, and I'm the one who's putting these coolers in his fridge because he's 18, it's 21, it's 19 here to drink. So I'm looking, I go, does anybody notice that I'm the one who's doing this? And they all looked at me and said, well, you were so good at hiding it before. We just figured you knew how to do this best. Right? So there's those jokes, and it's having the conversations, and we open that up with our kids, and having that where it's just such an open. And somebody once said to me, well, what do you do? Like, are they scared of drinking? Do they not want to drink? Or are you always on them? Don't. I'm like, listen, they know what can happen. Yeah. I can only lead them.
And it's going to happen. I mean, I don't mean it's something bad necessarily is going to happen, but I don't know a single person ever, including, normal people. My wife may actually be an exception, but like, I don't think she's ever been drunk. And that's very unusual. I mean, but she drinks wine. And so it's always here in the house and whatever else. And I don't, the greatest relief she had 10 years ago, it's my second marriage, was when we went out to dinner and I said, would you like a glass of wine? And she's like, oh my God, is that okay? She's like, I like you, but I was so worried that this meant
I could never drink again.
I'm like, I'm like, as long as I don't, I gave up my membership card to the drinking club, but that doesn't, affect anybody else. And look, we're at such a dangerous, difficult time in the world right now when it comes to, especially, young people dying every single day. I mean, you can barely smoke weed. You can barely do any of the things that honestly should just be a rite of passage for every young person.
Right.
I'm not saying they should or shouldn't do it, but it's not my business to tell a 20-year-old or whatever that they shouldn't have a couple of beers and smoke some weed or something. I mean, come on. That is, if we're demonizing that, then we've really lost our way, because those are just normal parts of growing up, and you figure it out. But now with fentanyl and heroin and horse tranquilizers and the other drugs that are now out there killing people literally the first time they use them, it's gotten serious where the old boys will be boys or kids will be kids conversation is not what it used to be, because you have to have some of those real conversations and give kids even the tools that they need to make sure that whatever they're doing is as safe as it can be. There's probably no such thing as safe, heroin, but you at least want to make sure that heroin is actually heroin, and that it's not 90% fentanyl and getting ready to basically just kill you.
Which is, there are many more obstacles. It's the last 30 years have gone on. There's many more obstacles now, like from simple things. I remember when the internet first came out, we were trying to explain to her at work, and I was trying to explain to somebody, all the dangers of the internet. And my boss came out and he said to this, we're at a gym, he says to the member, he goes, look at it this way. He goes, when I was younger, I used to have to navigate to find bad things. Like if I wanted to see a Playboy, I had to navigate to get to it.
Yeah.
He goes, now kids have to navigate not to see it. Right?
Yeah.
Same thing with drugs and alcohol, where all the harmful things we had to, again, navigate to get it. If you were 18 or 17 and you wanted to go to a field party and drink, you had to navigate to get it. Now it's a no-brainer. You can get it, no problem. Here in Canada, weed's legal everywhere. Right? There's, I think down the street from us.
As it should be. As it should be. The only reason it ever became illegal is because of some asinine, whatever. Personally, I never understood. I was not even back in my days of using for that decade, I was never a weed smoker. It just wasn't, it never appealed to me. But, you certainly can't call drinking one thing and weed another, because they're basically the same thing. You can overdo any of it, but it's just,
Well, that was a challenge I had with my kids when they legalized weed in Canada. So every province has a different drinking age. It's either 18 or 19. So here, it's 19 to drink, but it's 18 to smoke weed and to buy it. It's like, okay, we missed the math on that. So,
well, generally though, Canada has a much more level-headed approach to just about everything, honestly. But I think that the one thing and this is not like some big announcement, but I am potentially going to do a podcast soon. I've been toying with this idea for years, but it's, a lot of my mission is exactly the kind of conversation we're having here, which is real talk. The problem is everybody's so worried about, hurting somebody's feelings. And I'm not talking about, yes, I am talking about social issues, but too often we end up navigating around things in such a circumspect way that nobody even knows what the hell we're talking about.
Right.
Like, fentanyl has killed a couple of people while you and I have been talking in the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, that is just simply not okay. And the more we can have real talk about recovery and not my recovery or your recovery, it doesn't have to be AA. It doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be real.
Yeah. And that conversation is missing for a lot. And it's becoming, again, another target from years ago. It's becoming a politicized thing now, which is what's making it even harder for people to find recovery and the mental health out there that we're trying to help people get. And there's still that stigma, right? There is still that stigma behind certain things when it comes to recovery and wanting to talk about it or not talk about it. And the people who are talking about it, so my posts on social media are all about recovery and mental health and addiction and my family, right? These are the things that I want to talk about and get out there. And one of my wife's colleagues said, he should really tone it down. It's always it's out there every day. And I looked at her and I said, what all he's telling you is he's uncomfortable with the conversation.
Yeah. Good.
So that's it. And if he's uncomfortable with it, it's going to force him to start eventually question why is he uncomfortable with it. It's that simple.
Well, and again, we can't, what we're doing isn't working. And actually it is working, especially here in the United States. And what I mean by that, it's working the way it was designed. It's called dollars. Mm-hmm. And, that's why there's lobbyists for the addiction treatment industry. There's some great ones out there. I work with a few of them. There's one called Ashley Addiction Treatment Center in Maryland. They're amazing. And, there's a group of them that are really trying to do things the right way. But you've got tens of billions of dollars annually that are passing through jails, hospitals, prisons, rehabs, IOPs, you name it, the pharma industry. And that whole industry relies on the rates of relapse, quite frankly, which is almost, which is 90% or greater for the most part when someone goes through treatment. So it's not to say that all of those things can't work, but they're kind of designed to either take a long time and a lot of cycles, because that creates a lot of income for, parts of the industry. And, I've to not continue having conversations about how we can make that better is just crazy.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. I actually reached out to a friend of mine who lives in Montreal, and he's a rehab specialist and has a therapy group that he does, and it's a great facility, but it's an office, right? It's not a facility yet. And I said, I said to him, how do we do things like they have more in the States? Because I guess population makes a difference as well. But I said, there are so many, like, when we're talking about the penguin movement for recovery with Ashley and everything we're doing there,
Yep.
like, we don't have that here. And he said, there's a few private places. There are, $17,000 a month is out of a lot of people's reach.
Yeah.
Right? But we're not talking about it enough. Like, there's a lot. Again, I have that jealousy of, like, how come we can't do a massive run and fundraiser and this and that for this center or that center, because they're so few and far between. Or you're going through the public system, which the public system, it's publicly funded. They're generally broken.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a whole other world of what's out there. And people, and when I got sober, I did a public program, and it was eye-opening. I loved it. It was eye-opening, where I met somebody who relapses continuously to get 3 meals a day and a roof over the head.
Yeah.
Blew my mind. Like, you hear stories, but to talk about them with the actual person who's doing it, wow.
Yeah.
Gave me that we need to talk about this more and fix this more and do more. So it's crazy.
Well, and there is, Matt, there is an unlimited number. People ask me sometimes, like, how many, maybe it's a family member even of a person who's struggling, like, how many chances do I give him? I'm like, unlimited.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, there's not a point at which, now, there is enabling, and I'm not, there's a difference between loving and supporting and always bailing someone out. There comes a time when a person needs to face the consequences of what they're doing. Otherwise, they're never going to change. If they don't lose a job or a relationship or get thrown in jail, or, like, if those things aren't happening, the person's very unlikely to, ultimately to make a change. So those things sort of need to happen for most people. Like, I tell this story, keep it brief, but, like, we have a huge homeless population here in the United States, and, like, I give money to homeless people, and I don't give it to every one of them, but usually when I do, it's at least $5. A lot of times it's 10, it might even be 20. And if somebody's with me, they're like, why you give that guy $20? Like, what he's going to do with it. I'm like, man, I'm just helping him get closer to his bottom. Because that 20, it's not my business what he spends it on. I'm not giving it to him for him. I'm giving it to him because I'm serving myself, and I feel good about helping this person. And that help might mean that this is the last bottle they ever buy, and it gets them to the place where they're finally ready to make a change. People get so caught up in, in that kind of nonsense. It's none of my business what he does. If it kills him, then that's on him. That's not on me.
Right.
And if it saves him and it pushes him towards making a change, I'll never know it, because I probably won't ever see him again. But, like, I don't, we get too caught up in doing things always the right way. Do something, take action, talk about it, help somebody, figure out how to get somebody into AA or treatment or whatever it is. There are answers out there.
That's amazing. There are answers, and that's amazing. That's a great thought process of, you're just helping them get closer to their bottom. I remember years ago, I was having lunch at a Hard Rock Cafe downtown, and having lunch, and I was up at the bar eating, and a homeless guy walked in, dropped a whole thing of change on the bar, and the bartender grabbed it, handed him a 20. He walked out. I'm like, what the hell was that about? He goes, drug dealers don't take change. And I was
that's it.
Never even thought about it. He's got to get my number. And I looked at the guy, he was very similar to your mindset. I said, but you can help him by not giving him the money, like by not changing it for him, because he's going to get it from somewhere. And if it helps, he goes, it's not my question. Maybe he's going to buy a hot dog on the street. I don't know.
Yeah.
He needs to change, switched up. Here you go.
And again, maybe he's going to go buy a $20 rock of crack cocaine and smoke that, but maybe it will be the last one he ever buys. Maybe it will lead to something that changes everything. And again, it's not our business to micromanage other human beings. It's our business to not only serve as an example, but also to serve people when they need help. And if that guy, does he need help? Absolutely. Is he ready to have help? I don't know. Did he walk? Not unless he walked in the bar and said, "Could somebody please help me? I'd like to get sober." I mean, come on. And again, we get too caught up in trying to change people, and what you have to do is, as the saying goes, meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And that kind of love and non-judgmental support is what allows people to finally find a path to a better life. And you know what? I work with a ton of homeless people, here in North Carolina at a particular center. And my attitude is this: if a guy living on the street was drunk or high 365 days last year, and then this year, because he got some help, he was drunk or high 200 days, is that better? Yeah, it's better. Is it abstinence? No. I mean, so again, we too often judge sobriety by continuous sobriety and complete abstinence. And look, sure, I think that is the goal, but it's not for me to judge other people or to not help them because they come back to the homeless shelter, 10 times in a month. They clean up for 3 days, they relapse, and they come back. Okay, that is not my business in life, is to judge them because of that. My job is to open my arms. Doesn't mean I don't once in a while go, really?
Right.
you're here again. But in general, if I can have the attitude, everyone is worthy of help, then I'm doing the best that I can, in the universe. And then when somebody really specifically says, look, I want to go into treatment, or I want to change something, can you help me? Then I need to kick into high gear and do the best I can to help out.
Well, they have that, there's that, again, all those inspirational sayings that go out there that don't seem to apply to addiction and recovery. How is it I can fail 7 times, but I get up 8? And that's the celebration on the 8th. The same thing is going to happen in recovery. And there's that.
Yes.
I know myself, I know yourself, when I finally stuck, it's stuck. But I hit that bottom, and my rock bottom wasn't the same as your rock. It was my bottom where I woke up and I'm like, this can never happen again. Right. And we have that. I tried to explain to somebody, the rock bottom isn't like, death doorstep. It could be anything that I never want to experience again, any part of that.
Totally.
And that's why, somebody says, so you can never drink again? I go, I can drink whenever the hell I want to drink. I choose not to drink anytime I want to drink. Right? It's not like I'm going to blow up if I ever have a drink. Well, I will blow up in different ways. But, but I remember what my why was. Why I stopped drinking is why I won't drink again. That was my rock bottom. That's my like that bar. So, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, so many people are sober curious these days, as I like to call it. And that's a good thing. They have questions and they wonder. And I love to say to people, because I really mean it, you don't have to label yourself as anything. Mm-hmm. Like, the question you need to ask yourself is, how does this behavior serve me? Whatever it is. Like, if you're only having 2 beers a day, I'm not sure you could be an alcoholic at 2 beers a day, but you might still be questioning, how does this serve me? Like, is this really helping me? It's disrupting my sleep. I don't feel like going out and exercising because I'm more interested in having my 2 beers, like whatever it is. So you don't have to stand up and say, I'm an alcoholic, but you can, if you're someone who wants to be the best that you can be, you can just simply ask yourself that basic question. Yeah. How is this behavior, whatever it is, serving me? And if it's not serving you, then stop doing it. It's not rocket science here, It's not. We drank.
or reused. It's not rocket science. It's not like that's all it
Yeah.
is. And choosing not to. And I joke around like I like this. I like craft brews. I liked all the microbreweries. I like the taste of it. I like good wine. I like top shelf liquor. I would joke around going, you know what? I really wish, in order for me to escape my demons and self-medicate, I wish I licked the backs of purple frogs. It would have been a lot more fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Yeah.
I chose this route, and so therefore, it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve me, my family, my kids, anybody around me who knows me. And again, like you said, when you talk about it out loud, that support system we don't realize is there. There's a lot more people. Like I was at a wedding one night. I ordered a drink and club soda or whatever it was, and a friend of mine also ordered one. He ordered a gin and tonic, and they looked both very similar. And he looked at me, knowing that I don't drink. He looked at me, handed it over. He's like, I didn't watch this guy pour it. Hang on. He goes, can I get another one of those? Just give me the club soda first. And he was like, really? I'm like, he goes, yeah. And it was like, he was protecting me, right?
Yeah.
I know that if I had taken that sip, and which I do, I said, somebody hands me a drink, I'm going to sip it first.
Of course.
So if I had tasted the gin, there's that, and I think you talk about it in your book, there's that moment, right?
Yeah.
I have a choice. I can go, it's here.
Yeah.
Or no, right? There's again, would it serve me? I could take it as the excuse of, well, I already had a sip of it.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's intent. Intent is what matters. And, and I want to switch gears. I know we burned a lot of time on really good stuff, but
that just means we have to do this again,
Totally. Anytime. But psychedelics are a big thing these days.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that, 5 years ago, I still would have said under no circumstance would I support psychedelic, blah, 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 blah. Mostly because I didn't understand it. I just didn't understand it. And what we don't understand, we're afraid of.
Yes.
And, and I have since come to understand, I'm partners with Deepak Chopra in some addiction related stuff. And, several people who I consider to be very, very prominent and smart and understanding in this world, support therapeutic use of psychedelics to help people either get sober or get past depression or PTSD. And, a friend of mine a couple of years ago, who's a veteran, very strong supporter of psychedelic therapy for veterans, especially with severe PTSD. I was kind of having a debate with him. I was still like, I couldn't figure out which side of this I was on. And he's like, okay, let's make this super simple. Do you think it would be better for, a veteran to have, ketamine therapy with MDMA or to take a gun and blow their heads off? Which one would you choose? I'm like, okay, yeah, I see your point there. Because there's no coming back from what happens to so many people out there, and nobody ever died of a psilocybin overdose.
Right.
Literally, it's not possible. It's not an addictive substance. It simply can't happen. It's the typical fear out there in the world of, something, especially with a name called psychedelics, that feels like, it's all LSD and going down, deep holes. And the more studies there are, the more research that we're doing, the more that we understand that brain chemistry can actually be altered by some of these substances in extremely positive ways. So the point of that is the direction that we're heading with mental health in this country, there is and around the world, it's not just here, but to not say that everything is on the table for discussion would just be arrogant and stupid. And there's going to be voices out there that are going to, for their own agendas, try to distract us from finding new ways. And look, I'm embedded in AA. I went to a million AA meetings for a long time. I don't go to very many anymore, personally. It's not that I'm better than or past it or whatever. I have some different avenues that I choose these days. But the old timers who are so embedded in there's only one way to do this.
Right.
Those are people that I don't respect, and I don't have any interest in listening to them.
Yeah, I've been there. I've had those conversations as well. And it's whatever works for you. And I love the psilocybin talk. So I want to quickly, before I know you have to run as well, and we're definitely going to have to continue this again.
Anytime.
There's so much to go over. You mentioned earlier you do work with Ashley Treatment.
Definitely.
So how do you get involved that quickly? And then let's talk about what you're doing with that, because the Penguin Movement for Recovery is a huge one.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it is, look, going way back to my early years of sobriety, I just woke up I think around year 5, and I said, I'm going to go for a 5-hour run today to honor my 5 years of sobriety. And pretty much every year since then, I do the same thing. Now, it won't surprise you that it's gotten harder.
Yeah.
I'm 30 years, getting ready to be in July, 31 years sober, and I'm 60 years old. So it gets complicated now. But the fact of the matter is, it's my way of honoring my years and doing something that makes me really dig deeply into my physical well-being, and it also serves my mental well-being. But a couple of years ago, I became an ambassador for Ashley Addiction Treatment Center, which is up in Havre de Grace, Maryland. I don't want to draw a big distinction here, but I think it's an important one. It's a nonprofit treatment center. Ashley, Hazel and Betty Ford, Cumberland Heights, Caron Institute. Like there's a handful of what I consider to be the premium nonprofit. Now, just because they're nonprofit doesn't mean they don't need to make money, but it does mean that they don't have shareholders that have their hands out and they're always looking for a profit motive. And the reason I love Ashley so much is because they are interested in having conversations about things like plant medicine therapies. I mean, they're not doing that right now, but they support research into these things. I work with a company called Whoop, which is this wearable device on my arm. And so, at Ashley, we put Whoop devices on patients so that we can actually monitor all the things that wearables monitor: sleep, exercise, recovery, all of these things, because more information is better.
Yeah.
And, and so Ashley is a very forward thinking group. So I came to them a couple of years ago and I said, hey, I do this sober birthday run every year. What do you think about doing it on campus? And they love the idea. And so July 22 and 23 coming up in a few months, I will be running on a 2-mile loop on campus for 31 straight hours.
Wow.
And literally everyone listening to this and beyond is invited to come join. There's a small registration fee if you want to come run a 5K. If you have a year and you want to come run for a mile or an hour, you could do that. If you have 20 years, you can come join me for 20 hours. You can do whatever you want. There's no rules here. And it's not honoring my sobriety. It's honoring yours. Or you may not be a sober person listening to this, but you have family or friends who are, or maybe you lost someone to this terrible disease of addiction and you want to honor them by coming out and supporting this great cause. And, so I'm sure we can put something in the show notes, a link to the Penguin. We call it the Penguin. Penguins have a particular place on Ashley's campus. You'll actually see penguins. The place has been there for more than 40 years, and the founder and his partner, for whatever reason, loved penguins. And so there's penguins in the stained glass, and there's penguin figurines around. And so I just decided that was probably about what I look like when I run these days too, because I've never claimed to be a pretty runner, but I'm an efficient runner. And just like my sobriety, people are always like, wow, you're going to actually go for 31 straight hours? I'm like, yeah, addiction doesn't stop. And I can sacrifice, a night of sleep and a few days of soreness to keep moving. And it's about movement for recovery. You said it. So you can walk, you can run, you can bike, you can do yoga. It's about moving your body. And I will, as we wrap up, I want to say this. The thing that people forget is your physical health has a huge impact on your mental health. And, if you're a person in sobriety or who wants to be, and you're not at least getting out for a walk 3 or 4 days a week and doing some of the minimal things for yourself and your body, then, you're missing a real opportunity. So, get out there and move your body. And, that's the place to start. Mental health takes a long time. I'm 30 years into this and I'm still learning that every day.
That's awesome. Listen, Charlie, stick around for one quick second while we're done here. I know you got to go, so I really want to thank you for doing this. I got like notes, questions. That's why I like the conversation.
Anytime, Matt.
So I definitely want so many more we want to go through. I'll put all the notes in there. Now, if somebody can't do the Penguin, can they participate virtually? Or is it all in person?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, virtually can be just honoring that. If you feel so moved to make a little contribution, 25 or $50 or something, please feel free to do that. But on the day of the Penguin, which will be July 22 and 23, by all means, do your own thing around your own neighborhood or in the park in your neighborhood, and then get on the Ashley website and just post, your support. So it doesn't have to, we make things too complicated sometimes, and I'd love to see you there. You want to come talk to me again, or to our mutual friend Hillary, you come to the Penguin this year, and you could probably bank half a dozen podcasts.
That's
that
the
would
overall
be
plan. Just so you know, my wife and I have a trip to go to Europe. We're trying to figure out the day, so maybe landing in New Ireland on the way back.
Yeah.
We're working on it. Trust me, it's
Matt.
moving stuff. So I'm gonna let you run.
All right.
Stick around for 2 seconds here. Again, thank you so much, Charlie. This is Charlie. This is Matt. Rise up. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Rise Up, Stories of Recovery, Resilience, and Renewal with Matthew Tobe.